Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Courtney and I want to thank my new and returning subscribers for clicking on this video and spending some time with me today. This case is a doozy, and I know they're all doozies, but this one is wild. So there is a lot to cover here. Normally I have about 5 or 6 pages of notes, and there's like 28 pages of notes here. So get cozy because we have a lot to discuss. So first, before I go into too much detail, let me kind of like set the scene for you. It is Christmas Day, December 25th, 1986, and police have a warrant to search Helle and Richard Crafts' home. Now, the last time Helle Crafts had been seen alive was November 18th. So now it's December 25th. So police have a search warrant. They go into Helle and Richard Crafts' home. Richard Craft and their 3 children are not there. They are vacationing in Florida for Christmas. So this is when the police find that it is the perfect time to go in, where they can just go and search the home as thoroughly as they want. So while searching the home, they find that in Richard and Helle's bedroom, there are pieces of carpet that are cut out in like squared sections. And Richard and Helle Craft actually had a live-in nanny. So they talked to the nanny, and the nanny says, listen, there was a stain on the carpet about the size of a grapefruit. And Richard Craft cut it out, and then he started to slowly cut away more of the carpet. Also, while searching the home, they find blood smeared on the side of Richard and Helle's bed. They're also able to get into Richard's credit card statements, which shows that he made a purchase for a very large deep freezer, some new bedding, so like a new comforter, and a $900 purchase was made for a rental of a large piece of machinery. Now, while looking at the credit card statements, they cannot see exactly what this big piece of machinery was, but they will find that out later, and I will absolutely tell you. So with all of this being said, where is Helle Craft? Helle Craft, who was born Helle Lork Nielsen, was born on July 7th, 1947, and she was born in Denmark. She was an only child. She was described as very vibrant, very outgoing, very bubbly, very fun, and she was absolutely beautiful. Helle enjoyed school a lot. She was one of the very few students that actually enjoyed going to school. She made friends really easily, and this kind of continued to follow her into adulthood. She was very friendly to everybody. Everybody wanted to be her friend. She was just very kind. She was also extremely smart. When she was just a teenager, she learned French and English, and she was also able to understand German, Norwegian, and Swedish. Helle actually went to college in England, and she later worked as an au pair, which I'm not trying to do like a fancy French accent or anything, but she worked as an au pair in France, which when I looked it up, it is kind of like almost like a live-in nanny kind of, but they don't get like a paid salary. It is a very temporary position. They become a temporary part of the family. They do like light housework, childcare, things of that nature. By the time Helle was 20, she had matured into a very beautiful young woman. She turned the heads of every man when she walked into the room. Also, while Helle was living in France, she got a job as a flight attendant with Capital Airways. She loved being a flight attendant. She really loved the thrill of flying to new places and just adventuring the world. Now, later she heard that an airline called Pan Am Airways was looking for a stewardess, so she applied for the position, and only 8 people out of 200 people were chosen for the position, and of course, she was one of the chosen. She was then sent to Miami for her training courses. Now, she very quickly excelled and was number 1 in her class, because you have to think, for one, I'm sure she's just a natural at anything she does. She kind of sounds like that kind of person, but she also had prior experience to being a stewardess, so this really helped push her to the top of her class. During her training courses, she stayed in a hotel room in Miami, and this motel, it was near the airport. It was usually occupied by people who worked for the airlines. It was cozy, it was small. I mean, it worked out pretty good. Now, there were not just flight attendants living in this motel, there was also pilots. Well, being under the same roof for a while, men and women, they're gonna, you know, not always, but it was said that the stewardesses, is that how you say it? The stewardesses, the female flight attendants, they would kind of hook up with the pilots sometimes. Now, Helle's friend actually said in a later interview, quote, "She didn't tell you intimate things about men she saw. She was far too cautious to be promiscuous, but she did have a few lovers. Now, May 24th, 1969, Helle was waiting in her motel for a flight, and this is when she met Richard Crafts, who was a 31-year-old pilot. Little did she know, meeting Richard Crafts would change her life forever. So, in this time of May 1969, Richard was a young pilot. He was kind of scruffy. He didn't, fix his hair perfectly. He didn't have it all slicked back. It was kind of messy, and some women find that attractive. So, he was kind of he always had a woman with him. He kind of dated female flight attendants exclusively. He wouldn't date anybody that worked in any other field. He just wanted a stewardess. I don't know if that made him feel complete being a pilot and dating a stewardess. I don't know if it was an ego thing, but that's just what he did. Richard Crafts was born in New York City on December 20th, 1937, and he had 2 older sisters. Now, his father, John Craft, was a super successful businessman in Manhattan, but he wanted to live more in the suburbs. So they moved to a suburban area in Darien, Connecticut, and John Crafts put his son Richard Craft into a private school to hopefully, have him be successful as well, starting in school, be very successful, get good grades. Unfortunately, Richard Craft did not excel very well in the private school, so he later graduated from Darien High School. Richard attempted to go to college, but it wasn't for him, and that's okay. But he soon dropped out of college and joined the Marines in 1956. Now, while he was in the Marines, this is when he realized that he was really, really good at flying planes. In 1966, Richard Craft returned to the United States, and being a pilot, it was really, really easy for him to find work. In 1968, he landed a position as a pilot for an airline called Eastern, which at the time was one of America's biggest airlines. He was really busy all the time, but he also loved his position as a pilot. Like I said, I feel like this man had a pretty big ego. So being a pilot made him feel important, made him feel special, and he was making some big bucks. Now, when Richard and Helle met in 1969, Richard was already with somebody else. And I read that Helle knew this, and she didn't seem to mind. They had kind of an on-again, off-again kind of relationship. And even though he was with other women all the time, she still continued to see him. I read that they would fight a lot. Their relationship was very toxic, and they would even fight in public. They just didn't care who was around and who saw, but even though they fought a lot, they always would get back together. Now, Helle's friends did not like Richard. They thought he was a jerk. He was a cheater, for one, and they thought Helle could get any man that she wanted because she was absolutely beautiful. They couldn't wrap their mind around why Helle wanted Richard so bad. Now, in 1975, Helle would become pregnant with their first child, and they would move to New Hampshire. The same year, they also got married, and then the following year, they bought a 1-level ranch-style home in the city of Newtown, Connecticut. Over the next few years, they would have 2 more children, so now they have a total of 3 children. Sounds like a fantastic, happy family. Then Helle wanted to return to her job as a stewardess. She just missed being at work. She wanted to get back into it, so she hired an au pair. She hired a live-in nanny. I'm just going to say it like that because I'm embarrassing myself trying to say au pair. She hired a live-in nanny. Her name was Dawn Marie Thomas, and she was 19, and that would really help with the childcare and the housework while Richard and Helle were working. Now, together, their income exceeded $125,000 per year, which back then put them in the top 5% of wages in America, and this was in the late 1980s. Now, today, that is equivalent to roughly $426,000 per year. So they were living very comfortably. Richard was the one who managed all of the finances in the family, so he put Helle's paycheck to take care of all of the housing, utilities, anything like the bills, when Richard got to spend all of his money on his favorite hobby, which was collecting guns. Now, he had what some would call an arsenal. He had tons of shotguns, handguns, 9mm, 44 calibers, 357 magnums, high-powered rifles, semi-automatic weapons, crossbows, hand grenades, tons and tons and tons of ammunition. I read it was enough to arm 50 men. He would spend hours each week in his arsenal of guns. He would be cleaning them, organizing them. That was more of his baby, I think, than his babies. Now, if that wouldn't cause enough trouble, Helle was always seen out in public with bruises on her face. One of Helle's friends later told police that Helle was physically abused by Richard. And this same friend also told police that Helle told her that she could never forgive the way that Richard treated her during her first pregnancy, and it was, quote, something that she would never forgive what he put her through. After the children were born, Richard would disappear for days at a time and not tell anybody where he was. So Helle didn't know if he was out working or if he was somewhere else with somebody else. And remember, I said that Richard would spend his money on whatever he wanted. It was mostly guns. He would go to gun shows all the time, browse the aisles, get whatever he wanted. He would also buy things that were not necessary, like a $25,000 backhoe that he never used. I read that their front yard was an eyesore to the neighbors because it was just cluttered with all kinds of rusted, broken down pieces of machinery, and their home constantly needed repairs. Now, in 1982, Richard became an auxiliary police officer in Newtown, and when I looked that up, I found that it is kind of like a volunteer, unpaid police officer. And even though Richard was not paid for his time there, he took it very, very seriously. Like I mentioned earlier, the uniform, the title of police officer probably made him feel very, very important and made his ego even bigger, made him feel like he was somebody. Now, in 1986, Richard was actually hired as a police officer in the town of Southbury. His salary was only $7 an hour, which was way less than what he was making as a pilot. Now, here we go back to the ego thing. Richard Crafts bought a 1985 Ford Crown Victoria, which was the same exact police car that the Connecticut State Police used, and he even decked it out with his own money with decals, radios, antennas, police lights, and a siren. Now, during all of this, even though he is married, he is still seeing other women. Helle was aware of all of this, but she just kind of kept it under wraps. I don't know if she did it for the children, or some people say she did it to keep up appearances. But Helle openly spoke about divorce with her friends. And in the summer of 1986, she actually hired a divorce attorney and a private detective named Keith Mayo, who was a former Connecticut cop, and he would gather evidence against Richard. Now, detectives would later interview Richard and Helle's live-in nanny, Dawn Marie Thomas. She told investigators that on November 19th, Richard very suddenly woke her up around 6 a.m., said that Helle was driving to his sister's house because there was a major snowstorm happening. They had lost power there where they were at, but Helle was driving to his sister's house because they still had power there. Now, Dawn Marie, she thought this was really kind of strange because why would she get out in this snowstorm and go to his sister's house where there's power without taking the children? Or why would she even try to attempt it in the first place? Because, like I said, it was a huge snowstorm. Visibility was very, very poor, and it was just very dangerous to try to be traveling. Now, Richard was very adamant that she gets up, she gets the children up, they get in the car, and they go to his sister's house where there's power so the children can be safer, they can stay warm. And apparently Helle had went there and then she left and went to work, and she would be meeting up with them later. This is what Richard told their nanny, Dawn Marie. This is what Richard told their children. So Richard dropped off the kids and the nanny at his sister's house, and Dawn Marie said to the police that he left almost immediately. He just kind of threw him in the door, said, "All right, see you later, gotta go," and he left. The nanny then told investigators that Richard did not come back to his sister's house and pick all of them up until that evening at 7 p.m. So he was gone for like 12 hours. And all this time, Helle was never seen by anybody. She never made it to his sister's house. She never checked in with anybody, nothing. Later that night, Dawn Marie would ask Richard, "Where the heck is Helle?" And all he said was, "I don't know." Now the next day, she asked again, "Where is Helle?" Richard then said that Helle traveled to Denmark to take care of her sick mother. Now, around this time is when Dawn Marie noticed for the first time that there were pieces of the rug that were cut up and missing from the bedroom. And when Dawn Marie asked Richard about it, he said that he spilled kerosene on the rug and he was just going to rip up the entire rug in the bedroom. So police are really suspicious at this point of Richard. They think he's lying, they think he knows something or he's a part of something, so they want him to take a lie detector test. So he agreed to it, and on December 4th, he passed with flying colors. Now, even though lie detector tests are not like a super useful tool to use in court, they do kind of help detectives a little bit along the way to see if somebody may be lying or not. One detective even said, quote, "Based on the polygraph examination and my numerous conversations with Mr. Crafts, he does not know where his wife is." Now, some detectives believed that Richard Crafts really had no idea where Helle Crafts was. Other detectives believed otherwise. Now, at this point, even though Helle's friends were constantly calling the police station demanding to know if there was any leads, anything going on in the case, some of the detectives not believing Richard Crafts, there was no evidence to show that he had anything to do with this or that Helle Crafts was even murdered. She had just simply vanished into thin air. Nobody knew where she was. Now, on December 11th, the police call Richard Crafts back in for another interview. Lieutenant Michael DeJoseph and Detective Robert Tvardzik, they had some questions prepared for Richard. Now, I'm going to read you just a short transcript from their interview. The question was, "Richard, do you know that your wife hired a private investigator?" Richard said no. Question, "Did you know that the private investigator has documented your relationship with a New Jersey woman?" Richard said no. "Why would your wife tell her friends that she was afraid for herself regarding serving you divorce papers and tell them to check on her if something happened?" Richard stated, "I cannot imagine her saying this. It is completely out of character for her to say this." When asked why the rugs were cut away in sections in his bedroom, Richard said, quote, "All the rugs in the house are being removed and replaced." He said he was cutting them away 2 feet at a time because it was much easier to remove them this way. It seemed like that whatever the police threw at Richard, whatever they asked, he had an answer for everything. Another thing police found odd was that for a man whose wife was missing and nobody seemed to have any idea where she was, he wasn't panicking, he wasn't worried, he just kind of seemed like, I don't know where she is. I don't know. Now, Keith Mayo, the man that Helle hired before, he wasn't happy. He knew that as soon as something happened to Helle, he immediately thought Richard. He met with friends, he met with attorneys, and everybody kind of agreed that Richard Crafts was acting hella suspicious. He knew something or he did something. Now, when Keith Mayo learned that Richard was cutting out sections of the rug, he was determined to find those pieces of the rug because he thought that there could have been blood evidence on it and it would have been linked to Helle's blood. So Keith Mayo got the help of a local trash pickup crew and they searched Canterbury dump for several days. Can you just imagine just this huge dump and going through it with garbage piled up to your waistline and just digging through everything and the smell and the things that you're going to come up on searching for these pieces of rug. Finally, they found a piece of the rug that was from Richard Crafts' bedroom. There was also stains on it, which they thought looked like blood. So they took the piece of the rug to the state police laboratory, which was led by forensic scientist Dr. Henry Lee. Now, by this point, the media was getting kind of in touch with everything. They were figuring things out, so of course they post stories. On December 17th, the Danbury News-Times published an article stating with the headline, "Police Seek Missing Newtown Woman." Now, Newtown, Connecticut was a pretty safe town. It was quiet. It was very nice. So this kind of stuff never happened. So the media was going absolutely insane with it. The police chief told reporters that at this point, they're considering it a missing persons case. Keith Mayo actually told the same reporter that he's afraid that the police are not taking this as seriously as they should. They're kind of taking their time on it when they should be going like full speed ahead. Now, of course, police are under a lot of pressure. They're wanting to get this solved because the city of Newtown is putting a lot of pressure on them and criticizing them for like, come on, like hurry up. Like, what are you doing? What's taking you so long to get this figured out? Now, back at the lab where Dr. Lee is trying to go through this piece of carpet to try to find evidence of Helle's blood, unfortunately, none of the stains on that carpet tested positive for blood. Now, at this point, the state attorney's office decided that the investigation would now be handled by state police investigators. So now it's in the hands of detectives from the Western District Major Crimes Unit, and they wanted to dig deeper into Richard's activities before Helle went missing. So this is when they pull the credit card statements and the phone records before the night leading up to November 19th. This is where they find that on November 13th, Richard bought a huge freezer from an appliance store in Danbury. It was a $375 freezer, and he picked it up on November 17th. Now, the large piece of machinery that they found that he rented for $900 came from Darien Rentals, and it turned out to be a wood chipper. So he's acting suspiciously. He's cutting out pieces of stained up carpet in his bedroom. He bought a huge deep freezer and a wood chipper. This is when police learn that Richard up and left with his children to go to Florida for the holidays, and they get that search warrant and go into his home. While they're in the home, they find a freezer, they search it, there's nothing. But what they didn't know is that this was actually his freezer that he had already had before he bought this new one. During the search of the home, they tagged all of those weapons because one of those guns could have been used to kill Helle. For the next few days, they turned that place upside down. They went through every single bit of that house and took 108 pieces of evidence. The evidence included a Smith & Wesson .357 revolver, a few .38 caliber revolvers, Colt Python .38 caliber pistols, Ruger carbine rifles. The list goes on and on and on. They also took things like hand towels, washcloths, fiber samples, and king-size mattresses with bedding. Dr. Lee also performed a luminol test all throughout the house, and that tested positive for the presence of blood. Some of the towels and washcloths that they took also tested positive for blood, and that blood came back as O positive blood, which was the same as Helle's blood. So now police have all of this evidence, but they still have no idea where Helle is. Now back to this wood chipper. Richard rented this wood chipper and it was called the Brush Bandit. He got this on November 19th, and detectives are starting to worry. They're starting to put these pieces together and they're like, oh my God, what did he do to this woman? Now on December 30th, detectives locate Joseph Hine, who was a utility man from Southbury, and Joseph Hine was out during the storm and he was plowing snow on River Road. Joseph said while he was out, he did see a wood chipper and a U-Haul parked on the side of the road in the middle of the night. So the detectives and Joseph Hine, they go over to Housatonic River, which is just outside of Southbury, and Joseph was able to tell detectives the exact spot where he saw the wood chipper and the U-Haul. And it was around an area called Lake Zor. So detectives get out and they're kind of like looking around the area, and they do notice wood chips along the bank of the river. But there was also really small bits of what looked like green plastic that was also laying along the riverbank. Detective Brown was also said to have gotten on his hands and knees. He was going through all of the chopped up pieces of whatever was laying across the wood bank, where he finds shredded paper. Among the shredded pieces of paper, he manages to find a piece of mail. And on that piece of mail, it was clear as day. It said, Miss Helle Crafts, 5 Newfield Lane, Newtown, Connecticut. He shouted, quote, something's definitely wrong here. And within an hour, there was a whole squad of police and detectives on the scene. They set a perimeter. They were searching the entire area. They were searching every bit of the ground, the riverbank. They were taking photos. They removed evidence from the site. Also, within an hour, several more pieces of mail with Helle's name on it were found on the scene. They also found strands of blonde hair, bone fragments, fabrics, cloth, plastic items, along with wood chips and some unidentified materials. They had to make sure that the items they were finding, aside from the mail, were related or connected to Helle Crafts. Shortly after this, detectives go to the rental agency where the wood chipper was rented from. And they got really lucky because that exact wood chipper was in the back where Richard had returned it. So of course it was towed and taken in for evidence. Now for several days, diving teams searched the area, but they couldn't stay in for too long at a time because the river was absolutely freezing and it was going to be dangerous for the diving teams. But police were able to get permission to lower the water level by restricting the flow at the power dam upriver. Divers were able to locate a chainsaw, and thankfully it doesn't seem like it was in the water for very long, but the serial number had been scratched off. A few days later, while detectives were still searching the area, one detective found a piece of a human toe. Then shortly after that, a piece of a human finger was found, and then a part of a tooth. Dr. Lee said, quote, our team's effort at Lake Zor eventually led to the discovery of 2,660 strands of blonde hair, 69 slivers of human bone, 5 droplets of human blood, 2 teeth, a piece of human skull, 3 ounces of human tissue, a portion of a human finger, 1 fingernail, and 1 portion of a toenail. So now police believe that Helle Crafts has been found, or unfortunately what was left of Helle Crafts. So now on January 11th, police get an arrest warrant for Richard Crafts, and that same night at about 9 p.m., a dozen Connecticut state troopers and detectives surround Richard Crafts' home. They then called Richard's phone, and he was ordered to come outside and surrender. And this man said, quote, "I'm tired, I'll take care of it in the morning." Like, no, get your ass out here now. Police were insisting that he come outside immediately, and Richard got very angry. He said, quote, "Don't call me back," and then he hung up. So of course, police aren't going to just be like, yeah, you're right, I'll see you tomorrow. Get some rest. We'll come back in the morning. No, they keep calling back. They keep having conversations with Richard over the phone. He promises to surrender several times, which he never does. And his children were still inside asleep. So at a little after midnight, about 12:30, Richard told police over the phone that he would be out in 5 minutes. And this time he actually did. If I had to guess, in these 5 minutes that he told police, like, hang on, just 5 minutes, I'll be there. If I had to guess, he was probably going around and telling his children goodbye, because he knew at this point it was done. He was done. So after Richard stepped out and surrendered, he was surrounded by police, and he was taken to Bridgeport Jail Facility to wait for a trial, and his bail was set at $750,000. Now this is where I'm going to get into the theory that police came up with. The police believe that since there was drops of Helle's blood in the bedroom, that Richard came up behind her when she was not expecting it. Maybe she was getting ready to leave for work. She was maybe making her side of the bed or something, but he came up behind her and hit her in the back of the head with a blunt force object. And this was in the very early morning of November 19th. Police then believe that Richard took Helle's body and put it in the freezer. Remember that big freezer that I told you that he purchased? Police believe that Richard then put her in the freezer, and then after that, that was when Richard woke up the nanny, telling them that there was a major snowstorm, there was no power, and they needed to leave and get to his sister's house, and he had them believing that Helle was going to meet up with them at his sister's house later. All the meanwhile, these children have no idea. They're packing their things, they're leaving, and their mother is no longer alive, and she is in a freezer in the basement. When Richard got to his sister's house and he very quickly, like, pretty much shoved her body in the door and left, that's when police believe that he came back home. And then sometime during the day, when Helle's body was completely frozen, he removed it from the freezer and went to a very secluded area in Newtown that he owned. And then that's where police believe that he got to work with his chainsaw that they found to make smaller pieces and then put the pieces back into the freezer. Then police believe that he took the pieces and put them in plastic bags and then went to Lake Zor and put those plastic bags through the Woodchipper, which would explain the green pieces of plastic that was also found along the riverbank. Now, thinking back on the timeline, police believe that when Joseph, the man that was plowing the roads, police believe that when he saw the Woodchipper, Richard was already done doing all of this. Police say that Richard was parked along the side of River Road because he was either running fresh wood through the chipper to clean it, or he was cleaning up the area and trying to get rid of evidence, which thankfully he didn't do a very good job. So this case, like I said earlier, the media was going crazy, and now that the man responsible has been caught and it was the woman's husband, it's going even crazier. There's a lot of attention. So they moved the trial to a different town called New London in Connecticut. A lot of the newspapers that was writing stories on this case really made everything, which it is very dramatic, but you know how people are when they write stories, they make it sound even more dramatic. So this really influenced some opinions from the jurors. One New York City newspaper even published an article on the day that Richard was arrested, and the title of the article was big, bold, capitalized letters that said, "Chopped to pieces." So during the prosecution, which was led by State Attorney Walter Flanagan, there was a lot of expert forensic witnesses, and Dr. Lee did testify about the collection of the little pieces of just everything that he analyzed. Dr. Lee was able to determine that 65 pieces of bone were, quote, cut with a heavy type cutting edge that produced a crushing and cutting force. He also said that bone and tissue and hair were all mixed together on the riverbank with pieces of wood. And one of the huge pieces of evidence during this trial was the chainsaw that they found at the bottom of the river. They were able to find remains of hair, human tissue, and blue fibers in the teeth of the blade, and those blue fibers matched the fibers that were in the rug that Richard was removing from their bedroom. And somehow, which is amazing, the forensic lab was somehow able to restore the serial number on the chainsaw even though it was really badly damaged. And this was back in the 80s, so like, that's impressive. That serial number matched a receipt belonging to Richard Crafts, showing that he did purchase that chainsaw on January 9th, 1981 for $644.95. But detectives, while they were searching the home during their warrant, they did not find this receipt. Keith Mayo is the one who gave that receipt to police. When Helle Crafts first hired Keith Mayo, she gave him a box of personal papers that belonged to Richard, and I don't even think she knew. If she knew it was in there, she didn't know what it was for, but that receipt was in the box that Helle gave to Keith Mayo. So during the search at the river, 2 pieces of human teeth were taken for evidence. And I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this name, Dr. Konstantin Karazoulis, he was a forensic odontologist, testified that the tooth was removed from the mouth with, quote, traumatic force that sheared it off and took the bone with it. And what really connected these teeth to Helle Crafts was the second tooth that they found. It was only part of a tooth, but it still had a metal crown attached to it. So Dr. Karazoulis, I'm so sorry, I'm saying this name wrong, I know I am. But Dr. Karazoulis took several hundred x-rays of this tooth after it was discovered and compared it to x-rays from Helle Crafts' teeth between 1980 and 1986. And it was most definitely a match. Dr. Karazoulis also was able to narrow it down to the tooth coming from the left bicuspid in the x-ray charts. He said he was, quote, medically absolutely certain of the positive comparison. So this case then went to the jury on June 23rd, and it lasted for 2 weeks. There were 9 men and 3 women who were trying to reach a verdict, but one man, I'm starting to wonder, when I was reading this, I was wondering if this man was related to Richard Crafts somehow and was able to slip through and be a part of the jury. I don't know. But this one man was so damn stubborn. He was holding on to a not guilty verdict. One of the jurors later said, quote, it was like reasoning with a child. Someone else said, quote, he had real difficulty retaining. And another juror said, quote, it wasn't chaos, it was hell. Then this very stubborn juror decided he was going to refuse to participate any further. So then on July 15th, 1988, after a 53-day trial, a mistrial had to be declared. So when the second trial happened, it was pretty much just a replay of the first. They went through the same exact theories. They went through the same exact evidence. And this whole time during the first and the second trial, Richard was just kind of like he just was, he didn't care. So then finally on November 20th, after only 8 hours of deliberation, Richard Crafts was found guilty. And when the guilty verdict was stated, Richard Crafts showed zero emotion. Richard Crafts received a sentence of 99 years in prison. Now, he received a sentence of 99 years in prison. As of today, he's released. During the time he was sentenced, there was a law known as statutory good time. It allows for very large amounts of prison time to be taken off for good behavior and kind of working little jobs in the prison. And since this law was in effect at the time that Richard Crafts was sentenced, so they have to apply it. Also, something really huge about this case, this was Connecticut's very first case where someone was found guilty for murder with no evidence of a body. Police never found a full body. So that is the very brutal and unfortunate case of Helle Crafts. I want you guys to let me know what you think down in the comments. I try to be as censored as I can because YouTube does not like true crime channels, and I do risk with every upload, if I do not kind of cut words out or just try to be more censored, I do risk getting shut down. But these cases, I believe that the victims' stories deserve to be told, and sometimes like this, I cannot believe the outcome where he was sentenced to 99 years and in 2020 he was released. That is all I have for you guys today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe, and I will see you next week. Bye!